Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
The lighting is comical. I hope everybody's enjoying the view of my forehead. Um,
Well, now that you
uh,
mention,
right? Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Um, yeah. So welcome everybody. If you are a past or current client, there is absolutely no reason that you should name yourself as that. So you can just be anonymous unless you truly feel like it. If you happen to be my mother who is supposed to be here, you're also welcome to remain anonymous.
Oh, that would
I
be
would,
fun.
I would too. Uh, so Suki, let's see, we've got. Oh, it's just Suki's note taker. Okay, good deal. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is, of course, restriction and why we default to this, and also why it doesn't work. Um, if you are a past or current client, then some of this will be review for you, but some of it will not. So let's get started on some slides. I've got no admin tonight, so when I go to the slides, as I've just done, you're just little postage stamps for me now. So if you have something to share, something to add, something to offer, a question to ask, same rules always apply. Just interrupt me. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's talk about the poverty of restriction. So our objectives tonight are so that we deeply understand why restriction does not work to magically spend less or make good, good quote unquote good financial decisions. We'll discuss the negative outcomes of using restriction, and if we have time, we'll learn two quick win tools you can use right now. And really, if we have time, we'll learn one longer term practice that once mastered will make restriction unnecessary. And that's just going to be a game. We will optimize for conversation over slides. So if we devolve into conversation, that is also fantastic. So yeah, you've been flat out lied to about restriction. Restriction in all of its forms tells us that there is a correct choice to be made, and you just have to be smart enough or work hard enough to figure it out. There's a magical, correct, perfect choice out there to be made. Restriction is often the only tool that we've been given for responsible behavior. And if it's the only tool that you've been given, it is the only tool that you can use. A restriction looks logical, but it is deeply, deeply emotional and reactive. A restriction also teaches us failure and inconsistency and reinforces that, which is kind of the thing we're trying to avoid, right? We're trying to get away from failure and inconsistency. And so it's ironic that restriction actually reinforces that for us. This is a random 4-year-old. I don't know who this kid is, but this looks like me at this age, except for the tidy swimsuit. So let's say you're this poor kid's parent, right? And it's time to go, right? We're done with our day at the beach. It's time to get in the car and go home. And clearly, this child does not want to get in the car. So you try and you cajole and you like try to bribe and you give choices and you try gentle parenting. And after a little while, you just pick the kid up and you throw him in the car. And the car we're using here is a 1970s Plymouth Fury, because that was the car that I was frequently chucked into when I was a child, bodily thrown into the car. I had those choices taken away from me because I wouldn't get in the car, right? So what's happening here is this removal of choice. It is when we're young, really young, at a time when we should have been learning how to regulate ourselves, when we had this kind of choice taken away from us and had things forced on us, we learned something else entirely instead. We learned that the only way I can get things done is to be forced. That's the message that we took away, was that the parents' intent? Probably not. It definitely wasn't my parents' intent. They just wanted me to stop screaming. They still want me to stop screaming. But once we learn this lesson, the only way that I can get things done is to be forced. We then, using something called confirmation bias, will reinforce that message to ourselves. And we can find lots and lots of data to support this. That our brains can remember, like it was yesterday, times when we could not be trusted to do stuff on our own and we had to be forced. Who's coming in? Okay. We've got royalty joining us. We've got royalty joining us. And that royalty is my mom. So
Oh, thank you, Hannah's mom. Thank you for the gift of your daughter.
are you there, Mom? Let's see. Yay, there she is.
Oh,
Hi,
there.
Mom.
Okay. Hi, darling. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Excellent.
I was just talking about rotten 4-year-old children have to be picked up and chucked into Plymouth Furies.
Jumped into what?
Picked up and chucked into Plymouth Furies. The car, the Plymouth Fury.
Oh,
Never-
Yeah.
Yeah, we know who
Yeah.
that was. So
Rotten children.
rotten children, terrible children, still terrible children. So just to back up to this slide, when we are children, we should be learning how to regulate ourselves and make choices. But what instead we learn is that the only way I can get things done is to be forced. So we find lots of evidence of that because we're looking for it. And we have this message reinforced for us many, many, many times. And because this is the only tool that we've ever been given, it's the only tool that we can use, this kind of forcing, obligation, or removal of choices. So restriction, limitations, force, whatever you want to call it, accountability, control, obligation, all that stuff. Whatever you want to call this, it all kind of amounts to the same kinds of things. And we hear these messages when it comes to our finances too. I just need to buy what I need, not what I want. We just have to buckle down. I don't have a choice, do I? You can hear the removal of choice and options and autonomy and all of these. I have to. There's the language of obligation right there. I'm only focused on this right now. So we get hyper focused as well. So all of this force, restriction, obligation, what does this actually do to our brains? Any guesses what this actually does to our brains when we feel like we have choices removed?
Well, I know for me when I'm dieting, it makes me want to eat the chocolate cake suddenly. It's the hyper focus on the things I can't have. And now that's all I can think about is the things that I'm not supposed to have.
Yes. Yes. What else? What are some other outcomes of restriction? What does it do to our brains?
I mean,
Well,
it makes me really mad.
It makes you mad, Soraya? Is that what you said?
It does. If I'm restricting myself from cake, that's one thing. That's already hard enough. But if somebody else is restricting me, I'm going to have all of the cake and not one piece.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What else? Anything else you think it does to our brains?
it makes me feel depressed, a little sad, because I know I have to restrict for my own good, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
even the way you said that.
I don't want it.
I don't want it. That was a very 4-year-old thing. Yeah.
You know that restriction and willpower is it's time limited. Like it doesn't last forever.
No.
It doesn't create a pattern or behavior that's sustainable.
No, you're absolutely right. We'll talk about willpower and motivation here in a little bit. Yeah, short time frame. What else, Mom? Anything to add?
Well, I would agree with all that. And just as Adriana was talking about willpower, it seems like whether it's a day or whether it's some other period, we can we can maintain that willpower. We can deal with that restriction for only so long,
Mhm.
and then, the diet gets blown or whatever,
Mhm. Yep.
because it's
Very.
like, it's like it wears us down and we just have no longer any resistance to it.
It's exactly what happens to our brains, right? Those of you who've been through the coaching know what this guy is. This is the hand model of the brain, and that's what happens. Our brains, the thoughtfulness goes out the window, and we are straight up reaction. We are responding. We're emotional, and we're going to have failure. So let's talk about this in even more detail. And again, if you've been through the coaching, this is review for you, but this is always important to review. So let's talk about the consent continuum. So on one end of the spectrum here is consent, and we talk about consent in our lives in terms of sex, and we always should be talking about it in that domain, but consent should probably be advocated for in lots of other domains of our lives. When we are making a choice from full consent, that means we are making that choice or decision with full knowledge of consequences, processes, risks, values, right? We've got our heads on a swivel. We know what's going on, and we're making a choice from a regulated place. Hi, Emmy. If you take one step off of consent, we are now into compliance. And that's where we are engaged in an activity reluctantly. And that's not consent. So like I've heard it said, and I've probably said it before, like, if you didn't want to do that, why did you do it? Because I felt compelled, right? Even that still is not full consent. And compliance typically is when we engage in an activity or an action in order to please or not disappoint somebody else.
Yeah.
This is where, like, around the first of the year, you may have noticed like people on social media saying things like 2024 is the year that I work out 5 days a week. They're making that public declaration, that public commitment as a way of leveraging somebody else's opinion of them against themselves. That's all compliance. Accountability lives here, all of that. Now we're on to pressure. So again, we're engaging in activity, but we're doing it reluctantly. And that's through the use of bribery, punishment, shame, judgment, manipulation, implied threats, a sense of duty or responsibility. And of course, lots of work tasks live here. And lots of home tasks too. So all of that pressure going in there as well. Now we're into coercion. And this isn't even reluctance. This is absolutely, we're not giving our permission. What was that? Somebody said something.
It's just straight up. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not, it doesn't matter if we're even reluctant, we're engaged in activity without our permission. It now looks like I have a halo. So I'm not.
It does.
It does. So I'm going to get a weird forehead sunburn. So coercion means that we are engaged in activity through the use of bribery, punishment, direct threats of physical violence or harm. And then we're on to the last, and this is the most severe. And if we're using the proper terminology for this, force is talking about physical force. So when we in our imaginations, when we picked up that 4-year-old kid and chucked him in the back of the Plymouth Fury, that's force, physical force. But it's also the believable threat to that. So that's waterboarding, putting a kid in the car, but it's also somebody saying, do what I say, I'm going to kill your family. That's all considered force. When I'm just talking, I will frequently use like pressure, obligation, restriction, force when I mean anything that isn't consent. But if we're using technical, correct language, compliance, pressure, coercion, and force are distinct things. So as we move from left to right, we are guaranteed to see certain behaviors. Not like sometimes you're going to see or look out for, but we are guaranteed these two behaviors, if not separately, then together. And that's rebellion and resentment. It is guaranteed. If you have a little kid, so let's say, think about a random 4-year-old, an average 4-year-old child, and you tell that kid, I want you to sit down on your bottom and don't get back up again. Is that kid going to be like, sure, that sounds reasonable? Or is that kid going to lose their mind?
Lose their mind.
Mhm.
Unless
They're
you
gonna lose their
hand them a
mind.
tablet.
Say that again,
I said,
Ariana?
unless you hand them a tablet.
I
And
mean,
then that's
yes,
coercion.
well, that's coercion, right? That's a manipulation, right? Still, there's always a price to be paid anytime we are making a choice outside of consent. And it absolutely does not matter if you are the one removing choice from yourself, or somebody else is doing that, or a situation is doing that. There's always a price to be paid. And for some of us who are mostly socialized and definitely housebroken, sometimes that price that we pay, the rebellion and resentment, is decades, right? That's why you can, like, if you watch someone who's acting out of rebellion and resentment and you ask them, are you feeling pressured? Just pick one of the words. They're going to say yes. You're bang on. This pattern is incredibly consistent. And we use it in the coaching, on the coaching side of things. If I see rebellion and resentment, I'm not looking at that as like, you're not being compliant, you're not doing what I told you to. I see that as an indicator that that person feels like they have choices removed. And it may be me removing that choice, they're removing their own choices, or a situation removing their choices. So before we carry on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what comes down as rebellion and resentment goes up, but what are your thoughts about this so far? Okay. So as you see rebellion and resentment come up, you should expect to see some behaviors come down. And this, I've never corrected this, don't know why. This should say long-term positive behavior change. And I'm sure you can imagine that when people come to me wanting to talk about their financial wellness, that they're asking me for long-term positive behavior change. But the ability to have long-term positive behavior change drops dramatically as you move from left to right. You will get long-term negative behavior change. You will get short-term compliance. You will not get long-term positive behavior change.
Hannah,
There's our, yeah.
sorry, I was going to say, I guess my thought on this is because I also do coaching, and I will frequently tell people, like, I can't want it for you more than you want it yourself. It's not my job to make you do anything. You come to these meetings of your own free will, and, you asked for coaching from me. So, how can I help support you to make the changes you want in your life? So I definitely see that of like, they have to want the changes for themselves. I can't force you to make any
Well,
changes
yeah.
to your finances. Yeah. Sorry.
And even that is a kind of pressure, right? You are here. What's going on? Like, that could be interpreted as a kind of pressure as well. Even if I signed up for it and I'm showing up, I can still feel pressured. Even if it's not coming from Ariana, it could be coming from other places as well. But yes, that's very, very real. Motivation and willpower, we will lose the ability to keep ourselves going, just exactly as you said, Ariana. We lose the ability to look for and take advantage of choice. So as we get the blinders put on us, we lose the ability to see choices. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. As we lose the ability to see choice, we can't see any more choices. So instead of being able to crack our brains open and kind of look around, we actually will get further and further spiraled into that lack of choice. I don't
I
think that
think
made
I'm going
sense
to
the way I
share
said it.
this slide. I would like to share this slide with a personal training client
Yeah.
to try to, like, really dial this in to say, I cannot force you. I don't think this is good for, and a lot of people that are looking for, physical training, guys that want somebody that's going to be a drill sergeant to them. And I try to make it understood, like, that's not going to help you.
Right. If that was going to work, you would have figured this out by now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hear people all the time. Absolutely. People say, Hannah, I really need you to hold me accountable. And my response is, no, that's not going to work. That's compliance, right? And that's this last word that I added in, autonomy, is what's happening. That's why the little kid loses their mind when we take a choice away from them. is because when we're doing that, we're telling ourselves or each other that you're not a real person. And I know that sounds dramatic, but there's a very good reasons that our brains do that. So we lose the ability to be ourselves. And you can hear people who've been out of control in their lives for a long time. They even say things like, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm lost to myself. And then the last thing to consider as you move from left to right is that you are guaranteed to have trauma, little t trauma, big T trauma, both. And this is an opportunity where we can traumatize and re-traumatize ourselves. Finances is one of the domains where we can traumatize ourselves kind of the all day, every day sort of like a garden variety trauma all the time. Any other thoughts or observations? Keep them coming on the slide before we move on.
I'm kind of miffed that coercion is on there. I mean, I figure it would go on the chart, but I'm kind of miffed that it's so close to force.
Yes, right. It's what we do when we can't physically force, right? If I can't physically force you to do something, then I'm going to try to manipulate you. That's where coercion comes in.
It's very effective.
It's very short term, right? Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of implied animal on animal violence here. So we've got a hyena here in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got 5 wild dogs surrounding this hyena. So what's going on at the back of this hyena's head is exactly the same thing that happens at the back of your head if you feel like you have choices removed from you. Lots of things in this picture are removing choice from this hyena. Certainly the wild dogs or painted dogs. I'm not very sure which was the correct way to, whatever they are. The mud bank behind the hyena is removing choice from that hyena. The fact that, what was that, Mom?
He's cornered and trapped and he's desperate.
And he's alone.
Yeah.
Right. Even the photographer, depending on how close the photographer is, may be removing choice from this hyena too. And we have no problem expecting that this hyena is going to respond with a kind of violence. It would be weird if the hyena didn't respond with violence. But we have very limited patience for ourselves and for others when they feel trapped and cornered, when we feel trapped and cornered, that we respond with acting out with our friends' rebellion and resentment. That's why rebellion and resentment is a healthy, functioning brain. If you perceive that you have choices removed from you, there's going to be rebellion and resentment. It might not be outward for decades, but it's there, right? Even the wild dogs in this picture, even they have a removal of choice as well, right? They have pack pressure. They can't just, wild dog number 1 can't be like, I don't feel like killing a hyena today. I will meet you guys back at the lair. That's not going to happen, right? They have pressure as well. They don't have unlimited choice either. So to our brains, to this hyena's brain, limited control, and I should make this clear, the perception of limited control, it doesn't have to be legitimate. It only has to be the perception of it, is what happens when we are under immediate threat. If we're under immediate threat, we will interpret that as a limit of control. They are the same thing to our brains. A removal of choice and crisis are the same things to our brains. Oh, and also Emmy. Any other, what are your thoughts around this before I take this picture down?
It's a very sad picture.
It's a very sad picture. I'm bringing it up for a reason. Oh, that's right. I'm not taking the picture down. So here's what happens. So we say something like, I feel like my life is out of control. And I know that, you folks do coaching too. And I'm sure you've heard this. I have no idea what's going on right now. I feel like everything's out of control. And so we get this conventional advice that comes back to us. Well, you need to do X, Y, Z to get your life back on track. Well, they'll say, let's work on your SMART goals. Focus on what's important. Read this book. Stick to your budget. Work harder. All of those things. What does that do? What are those offerings that we see the wild dog saying? How do you think that registers to a brain that's already a little bit freaked out?
Freak out a little bit more. I was right. I was right by feeling my life is out of control because none of these things are helpful.
Right.
Overwhelm, instant overwhelm. Oh, you just added one more thing on my list of shit to do.
Now I got to do self-care too. Are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And decision
Even-
fatigue, which one of those is the most important? If I had to pick one, which
They're all
not knowing
important.
which one's going to work.
They're all the most important thing ever, right? That everything is. Soraya, were you about to say something?
No.
Okay.
Well, and if you don't pick in my household, you know, if you don't pick dad's opinion and advice,
That's not
then-
safe.
right?
That's not safe, right? So we have this coming at us from the outside. You just need to work harder. But we do this to ourselves. I need to work harder. We just need to actually stick to this budget. I just need to work smarter. I just need to buckle down. I just need to stop making stupid choices. So we've got this messaging coming at us from inside and from outside. And honestly, the internal stuff that we do to ourselves is probably more devastating because that's the opportunity to reinforce that we are failures and reinforce that trauma. So any attempts at correction or direction will be perceived as further removal of control because that's exactly what it is. Right? Instructing, directing, correcting destroys autonomy. Even if they're like, I know we've all had this modeled for us, and I'm not throwing parents under the bus. And not just because one of my parents is right here, but like we have had that modeled for us generations back.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That, yeah. Our parents were working with the tools that they were given, who were and their parents were working with the tools, on and on and on. Right. But any effort to instruct, direct, correct will destroy autonomy. And we do not respond. Right. So this is what happens. Stop telling me what to do. We act out. There's that rebellion. Right. And then the wild dogs are saying, well, that's your choice. Right. We're just trying to help. I thought you were serious about changing. You're not being accountable. I can't help you if you don't take responsibility. All of that still registers as pressure. So, okay. So Hannah has a super beef with restriction. Yes, obviously. So why do we do that? If it's not good for our brains and it doesn't help us make better decisions, what are your thoughts? Why do we use restriction?
I mean, it's prudent sometimes, isn't it? I mean, you can't say, I mean, not to keep bringing it back to my world here, but like,
It's all about
you
can't.
you can't outwork a bad diet, no matter how much you think like, okay, you know what, I'm going to run 5 extra miles today. Number one, that is really hard to do, to add something like that. So like it is kind of prudent sometimes.
Right. And so I'll argue that if it's prudent, it's not restriction. And I'll talk about this in a little bit when we talk about the actual tools. But if it's thoughtful and prudent, my argument back is that's not restriction. When I'm working with somebody who has an actual shopping addiction, one of the things we talk about is abstinence. And there's a distinct difference between abstinence and restriction. Abstinence is thoughtful. We have to plan for it, right? Like being prudent with something, cutting back on calories or changing the way we eat. All of that, that's planned for. That's thoughtful and intentional, which makes it not restriction. Restriction is shut it down. We're not ever having any cheesecake ever again for the rest of our lives. There will be no pizza here in this house, right? And so that's kind of, yes, and we'll talk. Okay, I'll pick up what you're putting on. I got off track a little bit. I should just read the slides. Any other thoughts about why we use restriction if it isn't good for us?
It was modeled to us.
Yep. If it's the only tool you've been given, it is the only tool you can use. So restriction has a pretty good sales pitch. It's like, oh, here, I got what you need. I got just what you need, restriction says. So what is restriction going to help us do? Like, what is the purpose of restriction?
To achieve your goals.
Uh-huh. Sorry. Achieve our goals. The second question is, what is it trying to protect you from?
Yourself.
Kind of, yeah.
In other areas that
Yeah. Protect us from ourselves because I can't be trusted. Overindulgence, right? Because I can't be trusted to limit myself. Absolutely. Yeah. Try to protect us from failure. We're not going to do breakouts. This is the breakout. So we use restriction because it's available. And this is what you guys have been saying. Let's see how good my slides are. We've all heard the restriction as the tool for getting what we want. Yeah, it looks like everybody else is doing it. I mean, they are, but they're not having any success either. Restriction tells us the only way to keep us on track. It tells us there is one correct choice again, and that is restriction. And it does work, but it works inconsistently. And that inconsistency is deeply, deeply, deeply frustrating to us. Because I could absolutely restrict myself in my diet. But for how long? I've seen people come into coaching with crazy restrictive budgets. They're like, we can't keep this budget going for more than 6 weeks. 6 weeks is, you're a god. Like, that's fantastic. I'm not proud of you. Let's take this away. You're not allowed to do that anymore. I take choices away for the budget. Never mind. I got off track again. So restriction looks like it's the right way to do things. It is supposed to keep us safe, but it is inconsistent. And it does feel like we're doing something. It's work, right? We're doing some work, getting some work done. Anything that we can do to get towards our goals. And that's something called action bias. It's basically like, well, I have to do something, don't I? Right. So I have to I don't know what else to do. So I'm going to restrict my spending. I'm no more shopping on Amazon.
God. Yeah.
So restriction is, restriction is trying to protect us from laziness, temptations, distractions, being bad, right? This is where this gets tied right into our self-worth. I think we've talked about most of these so far. And so we're not going to do breakouts. What are the actual outcomes of using restriction?
Failure.
Yeah.
Resentment.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. What else?
Anger. Sadness.
Yeah.
Hunger.
Yeah. Craving. It's kind of all we can think about, as you were talking about earlier.
Right.
Absolutely. Any other outcomes that we can see of using restriction? Let's see. Yes, I should.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Short-term goal attainment. So you get that feedback loop of, well, that worked last time, but it's such a short term.
Yes, it's not sustainable. Yeah. You can't keep it going for very long, and the frustration that comes along with that. So I should have said this right as we were kind of talking about this. Well, we are evaluating the use of restriction as a tool, as a strategy, not if you're doing restriction correctly. Because I have had conversations with my clients. Okay, but Hannah, how do you do restriction, right? So it works. Like, I'm not saying you're doing restriction incorrectly. I'm saying that it's a shit tool. So there's a huge distinction between those two things. In the first condition, how do I do restriction correctly? It's making the assumption that we are evaluating you. If I say, like, you could throw that tool away, it's a bad tool. then we're evaluating the tool itself. We're not evaluating whether you are focusing on your needs and not your wants correctly. It is a setup for failure. See how my slides do this time. Procrastination, hesitation, avoidance. We're going to shut down. We do the international hand sign for shutting down. Did everybody know what this is?
Mhm.
I'm out.
Yep.
I'm
Give
done.
up.
Yep, I give up. Feeling more out of control. And it reinforces that message, I can't be trusted. Okay, so what do we do instead? Yes. Okay, yes. Stop talking about Hannah. Who else is right there? Like, quit talking about it. What do we do instead? Wow, that's blue. Okay. So let's talk about a quick win. And as I said, I'm calling this a quick win, but this is a huge skill. This is one of the first things I talk with my clients about, and this is self-observation without judgment. Self-observation with judgment, I've never had to teach anybody, but self-observation without judgment. I'm calling it a quick win, but it is a hard skill to learn.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about something called naturalistic observation. This is a way that scientists observe the natural world. So let's say there's a scientist out there in the jungle, and the scientist is observing a wild animal. Would the scientist be trying to change that wild animal's behavior?
No,
Why not?
because the scientific way is to observe and record in their natural state. And if you were to interrupt that, then now you have a skewed observation and it's no longer the truth.
Compromised data. You got
Yeah,
it.
perfect. Yeah.
Yep. See what my slides say. Scientist is not going to try to change that wild animal's behavior. Let's say the scientist observes the animal acting outside of the norm for that species. Would the scientist try to correct that wild animal's behavior?
No.
Why not?
Just observing.
Maybe start to ask some questions though. Like, hey, that was weird. New behavior that I've never seen before. What's going on there? Right? Ask more questions, get really curious, but probably not going to try to correct that wild animal's behavior. Yeah. Scientists not try to change if a change is observed. So now let's say that the scientist observes the wild animal eating a large quantity of something disgusting. Would the scientist write down in their notebook, oh my God, that is the stupidest, grossest, disgustingest animal that I have ever seen? Is that what the scientist would write down in their notebook?
Nope.
Why not?
Because it's a judgment call to say that that animal is the most disgusting animal you've ever seen. You don't know why you don't understand their behavior, so you can't make a judgment on their motivation.
Right.
The millennial says, don't yuck someone's yum.
Don't yuck my yum, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We don't know why the animal is doing that. Maybe we need to ask some more questions. And those moral and value judgments absolutely get in the way of the work that's being done, which is observing, taking notes. Scientist doesn't judge. Scientist observes and takes notes. The scientist basically has three jobs. Job number one is observation. Job number two, pattern recognition, which, by the way, you're a genius at pattern recognition. There you sit. Look at you, turning oxygen into carbon dioxide, just being a genius at pattern recognition. Our brains are so good at pattern recognition that we see patterns where there are none. And then the third job of the scientist is to come up with a hypothesis. And what do we do with a hypothesis?
We're taking an educated guess.
Mm-hmm. We're going to test that. Go ahead.
Develop a theory.
Mm-hmm. And we test it out. So to run experiments. So the reason I'm talking to you about the wild animal scientist, because I want you to be both. I want you to be the scientist, but I also want you to be the wild animal. Observing our behavior without judging it or trying to change it is hard, but it's worth it, right? Because then we get the opportunity to observe our own patterns, our own habits, routines, behaviors, spending patterns, whatever, eating patterns, activity patterns. Without judgment, we get the chance to adapt and change them. Not correcting, but running experiments on ourselves. So that was a quick win, which is a big deal. And this is quick win number 2. How are we doing on time? Awesome. So when you are using a tool, a strategy, or anything else, a system, budgeting, dieting, cleaning the house, taking a shower, I don't care. Anytime you have a system in your life, I want you to practice evaluating the system, not you, not yourself. Okay. So if I gave you a big pile of raw lumber and a hex wrench, an Allen wrench, and I said, hey, I want you to build me a table with just this raw lumber and a hex wrench, what would you say to me?
Need more.
May I have some screws?
Yeah.
Oh, this is it. Yeah.
How about a tape measure?
No, sorry. This is all you get. Yeah.
Oh.
A drill? No, can't have any of that. You would hand it back and go, come on, Hannah, seriously, I can't build the table with this. So you would be evaluating the system that I'm asking you to use, not whether you're taking this seriously, not how much you want this, right? You wouldn't go nailing away with that with a tiny little hex wrench like, my mama didn't raise no quitter. You'd hand it back and say, it's not going to work. I need a different tool. I need a different system. That's all that I'm asking you to do when you're evaluating any system. But of course, I'm aiming towards the financial systems that we use, of course. It's not working. So how do you know if a system, routine, habit, ritual, mindset, strategy, whatever, how do you know if it's working? We've got 4 questions. And with these 4 questions, you can evaluate any system in your life. First question, and this is the only one we want to know answer to, is, do I feel like shit when I'm using this system? Because if you feel like shit while you're using a system, a strategy, a plan, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to fail.
Yep. You're going to stop doing it. And that's going to look like failure to us, but it's really a failure of the system.
Yep.
Second question is this strategy customized to my life? Or like, question 2B would be, is it getting more customized to my life? If it's not customized, the wheels are going to fall off very, very quickly. And this happens a lot. Like it happened to me this year. I brought on 3 employees in January, and by April, my business budget was not working. I was trying to keep it up and customize it and adapt it as I went along, but my business changed too quickly for that. So I took the way my budget was structured, I took it out into sent it out into the cornfield. I put a bullet in its brain and started over again, right? It had to be customized. If they're not customized, they stop working. So let's say you and I are building a budget for September of 2024. Let's say 6 months from now, if you've locked that budget in place for September 2024, I can almost guarantee that by, I don't know, February of 2025, it's no longer customized. So whatever system you're using has to start customized, get more customized over time.
It's done by Thanksgiving.
It's done by Thanksgiving, right? October 2nd, it's done. Yeah, absolutely. What we're always aiming for with any system that we're using is a beautiful mix of structure and flexibility. Structure is how we carry forward our goals, and flexibility is how we change, internal change and external change. And related very closely to customization is ease of use. Is the strategy easy or getting easier? Certainly when I first build a system with my clients, it's not easy. But one of the benchmarks I'm looking for is this getting easier to use over time? If it's not, then we've got a problem with the system. Let's say it's a perfectly easy system. Year September 2024, easy, easy, easy. October, November, December, easy, easy, easy. And then starts getting harder and harder and harder to use. That's a fantastic indicator that that system is about to break, right? So it's time to take it apart and look at it. So let's say you don't feel like shit when you're using the system. It's customized and it's easy to use. It's still not working. So this is the idiot light from the car, from our cars. That's what this is. What we're doing is you're taking a step back from it. You let the little engine run a little bit. You take a step back, put your hands on your hips, and you say, is that sucker working? And again, we're not evaluating whether you're doing it correctly. I personally don't care if you feel like you're doing it correctly. That's not important, right? What we're asking is it working? And what we basically do is we take that little machine apart and then we put it back together again. And sometimes someone here is a mechanic. And sometimes when you take things apart, like you're like, what the hell is going on in here? That's correct. And this is correct. And this is correct. And it's like a little widget in there. So 2 centimeters off and it's throwing the whole thing off. Found a little thing, fixed it, and the machine fires up. Right? Was that correct?
Close enough.
Okay, thanks very much. So this is the one long-term practice. So those are 2 quick wins. We've got 14 minutes. We're doing good. It's like I planned this perfectly. I didn't. So we've got one long-term practice to spend less without feeling restricted. So the opposite of restriction is not blah. The opposite of restriction is expected. So if we're talking about spending, then we're talking about expected spending. We're talking about diets and food intake. The opposite of restricted would be planned food intake. This is what I'm going to eat when, right? Not restriction, but actually expected spending. I like twice a week. I just don't care what I eat. I eat pretty clean and I had somebody say, that's your cheat day. I'm like, no, it's not. I expect that twice a week I'm going to not really be thinking about it, just kind of consume. That's the expected. Expected spending is thoughtful, intentional, and without restriction. And so we're going to talk about a game. But first I want to do a little experiment on you. So let's say you are the marketing department of a gigantic company. And every 2 years, you're given a budget to spend on your marketing. And this 2 years, you're given $10 million to spend on your marketing. But you choose instead to only spend $2 million. Do you think you would keep that job?
Nope.
Why not?
Maybe it depends. Did I embezzle the other 8 million?
Good point.
You're still probably not going to keep your job. I don't know. Wait, is there something you want to talk about, Ariana?
I'm just saying, if I
Because it happens.
the outcome desired by the company with the $2 million, then yes.
If somehow magically you manage to do that, yes, absolutely. But that's probably not the case. I should have been clear with my scenario. So let's say you did not achieve the outcome, but you came to your boss and said, look, don't fire me. Look, I only spent $2 million. Isn't that great?
Yeah, but
Right?
Then
they wanted a different result.
Yes. They wanted results, period. So the
Mhm.
expected spending is the $10 million and the restriction would be the $2 million. Like this is super clear to see when we scale it up to the size of a large company. When we scale it down to the size of our own spending, it gets real murky all of a sudden. Like now it's a game, like I have to spend it as less as possible. That's what restriction does to us. But if we kind of think about it in the ways like for planning, for intentionality, for being thoughtful about our spending, restriction is actually the opposite of all of those things. So we're going to play a game, and the game is called Target Spending. So the purpose of this game is that we're going to be practicing spending awareness. And we're going to experiment maybe a little bit with tracking, just a little bit. And we're going to reduce restriction. Oh, I guess that was it. There's one more. So sorry. Guess who made these slides? So here, feels like there should have been another one. I don't know. We'll come back to that maybe. So here are the rules of the target spending game. And I really want to reinforce that this is a game. There's no way that you could screw this up. So take the pressure off there. Again, we're taking, because we don't want pressure. We know what what happens. So we're going to pick a time frame and make it no more than 2 weeks. So it could be one trip to the store, or it could be 10 days, or
MJ.
up to 2 weeks. Well, oh, MJ.
Yeah.
And you're going to pick a small portion of your spending, of your flexible spending, rather. So how much you pay on your mortgage, it's not a good candidate for this, because I hope that you know what that's going to be. We need something fairly small and fairly flexible. So groceries might be flexible, but it's kind of a big wedge of our spending. Are you okay?
Yeah. Donovan just ordered a pizza and the dog just went off.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's just the dog.
Okay. Hi, Donovan. So we want a small, flexible portion of spending. So instead of groceries, we're going to do like ice cream, right? Maybe. Or instead of like mortgage, maybe it's gas for the car. This doesn't have to be something that you felt like you've previously restricted yourself on, but it could be. It doesn't have to be, though. And then you're going to pick an exact dollar amount, no more, no less. And your job is to hit the game. Your game is to hit that dollar amount exactly. What was that noise?
That could be difficult.
Yes, it can also be fun. It can be fun and difficult at the same time. Yes, this is not necessarily super, super easy, but again, it doesn't really matter because this is a game. So here's some examples. I'm going to spend $25 on coffee in the next 7 days. So let's say that's my target spend. And today I spend $10, but now it's day 6. It's day 6 of my 7-day target spend, and I have $15 left to spend. What do I got to do?
Buy a lot of coffee.
I got to get myself to coffee shop, buy some coffee for $15, another remaining $15. So $25 on coffee in the next 7 days, $12 in the vending machine in the next 2 weeks. Another example of this, like, let's say you walk into the grocery store and you say, I'm going to spend exactly $124 grocery shopping. That's a perfect, we've got time limited. We've got exactly $17 on fuzzy socks in the next week. It's fuzzy sock season. So what are your thoughts about this target spending game? Do you need more examples? I have more examples.
I don't know.
Okay. So how would you keep track of your target spending?
Write it down.
Oh, yeah. Write it down.
Write it down.
Keep your receipts.
Keep your receipts. Try to think about it in your head. Try to remember it carefully in your head. I know. Right? I don't know if you have anything else going on with your head, but I certainly do. So this leads us right into tracking, right? So if I'm doing this in my coaching, target spending is kind of is our turning point. We're going right into tracking. And what people come back with, like how you kept track of your target spending, tells us like that might be a good way to start proper tracking of all of it. So what do you think you'll notice? What do you think you'll notice as you do a target spend?
You start weighing, do I really need that? Or can I find an alternative at a better price?
There we go. It puts our heads on a swivel almost immediately. Like, ooh, okay, that's good. But could we do that? We start weighing our different options, getting our heads on a swivel. Because like we talked about with that consent continuum, that's about choice. So what you just said was perfect, because now we are looking for choices. And if we're looking for choices, guess what we're going to see?
Opportunity.
Choices and opportunity. Absolutely. Any other reflections about what you think you might notice as you begin your target spending?
I feel like I'm gonna be annoyed.
How so?
I don't know. I feel like because it feels like restriction automatically to me, and that annoys me and makes me resentful. Like
Okay.
What if
especially
you,
in the food store, forget it.
So then my suggestion would be to raise that dollar amount.
I was just gonna say, what if you chose an amount that didn't feel restrictive?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, raise the dollar amount and see what happens. Because this is an experiment, right? This is just a game. So let's say you start doing it and it is annoying to you. Well, guess what? You can also just stop. You don't have to keep doing it. If it hurts you, stop doing it. Were you gonna say something, Mom? Where are you feeling reluctance and hesitation? Where at what point did you want to smack me in the face tonight? Is what I'm asking. I did put that on the slide. Not my mom. That's not a fair question because it's kind of probably always.
Always.
This woman has tolerated. You don't even know my brother. You think I'm bad?
No, we
You
think
place
you're
it-
great.
Thank you. I think you're great too. Any place, just don't blow me a kiss. Sorry, that was just for Soraya. Nobody else is gonna get that.
Oh.
Oh my God. Okay. Any place that you feel comfortable sharing where you feel that kind of reluctance or hesitation? And you don't have to. So yeah, we're running an experiment here. I'm sorry.
I'm still just trying to come up with what I would do.
Huh.
I like fuzzy socks.
There you go. Fuzzy
Yeah.
socks. It doesn't need to be $17. It can be $71. I don't. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Try it out. What kind of weird like manipulations of your environment do you have to do? What kind of like how do you look at the world differently if you're doing a target spend rather than restriction? And we're focused on evaluating these systems rather than you. How will you know it's working? How will you know it's not working? These are questions that I would ask if we were coming back. And what will you do if you find the experiment didn't work?
It was
I'm
just
gonna drop out of it. It's just an experiment. Right? Oh, you don't need to see that. You don't need to see all my windows. No, you don't. So I'm going to drop an exit slip in